Hey everybody, this is Chris with Overclockersclub. You know, September 19th is Talk Like a Pirate Day, so I could call this the 275R, but it's not. I missed it. It was about a month ago. So anyway, this is actually the 275R Airflow from Corsair. A really nice case that's aimed towards gamers, but anybody can use it. So let's get it out of the box and see what it looks like. Oh, Talk Like a Pirate Day. That's funny. Oh, sorry. Anyway, okay, so we got it out of the box, and we'll do a quick walk around here and look at the external features, and we'll look at the stuff that's going on the inside. And looking across the top of the case, there is the mesh filter panel that is easy to remove for cleaning. It has magnets around the perimeter, and you can see all the mounting provisions there for fans. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the other thing I notice are all the little openings, all the slots across the front fascia. That is, of course, for airflow, to not restrict airflow coming in. But the other thing I notice, if you look here on the side, there's that big gap, and I thought, oh, well, clearly the front must have been knocked loose during shipping, or maybe when I pulled it out of the box. But then I realized it's flush all along here. And this gap that I thought was accidental is actually intentional. It's there to allow more air in through the front, which of course with the case, you can never have too much air. Looking across the I/O panel here, there's the usual power button, a combination headphone and microphone jack, a couple of USB 3.0 ports, and the reset button. And then looking at the side, we have a full glass side panel, and it appears to be clear, not smoked, that you see in a lot of cases. Of course, if it were smoked, you really couldn't see in there as easily. And I like that nice clean look. You can really see what's going on with that white finish there. As far as fans go, there are two 120 millimeter front fans that are included, along with one rear 120 millimeter fan. And at the bottom there, I'll get the panel open so you can see better, but there's actually a spot for an additional 120 millimeter fan if you want to add one. Side panel here on the back is painted white, of course, to match the case. It is solid metal. And let me flip it over here so we can see what's going on the bottom. And the bottom of the case, there is a nice, easily removable filter panel there for the power supply to keep dust and dirt from being drawn in there. The feet have the usual rubber inserts. These feet look very similar. In fact, they may even be the exact same feet that were on the 465X RGB case that I just reviewed. But they have nice, generous rubber inserts there to keep from scratching your floor, as well as keep the case from sliding across the floor. And you'll notice these screws here. We'll talk about those later. Those actually hold the hard drive cage in, so you can remove that cage if you want some more space inside the case. Looking at the back here, nothing terribly remarkable other than the fan here. The rear 120 millimeter can be moved through these slots here if you need some more room there to clear some components on the motherboard, or to position it more in line with your air cooler, for example. We have our 7 expansion slots, and then these 2 vertical slots, which it's easier to see those when I have the case turned up so you can see them in the proper orientation. Those are to mount a graphics card in the vertical position, which I will show you when I get the system built up. I like that because a lot of the graphics cards today, there's a lot that goes into making them look nice. And when they're sort of tipped sideways, when they're mounted here in the usual slots, when the motherboard is in the orientation there against the backplane, you can't really show off your graphics card very well. But when you put it in these vertical slots here, you can show off your graphics card. All right, so I got the glass side panel off, taking the back panel off here. The other thing that's nice is the fasteners to hold the rear panel on, or actually the side panel. They're retained to the panel, so you don't have to worry about dropping them and chasing them around the floor. So that is nice. I like that feature when the fasteners are retained. All right, so looking in at the floor of the case, we have a very generously vented section there that's right above your power supply to allow airflow. There's an opening there to allow wires to pass through or cables to pass through for USB connections or the HD audio plug. Over here is a nice grommet to allow cables to pass through, for example, to power your graphics card. And there are two more rubber grommets there to help keep your wiring hidden as much as possible. And again, in the front there's the section where the bottom fan would go if you want to add another fan. And the way this cutout is, this is if you want to put a front radiator in there, which we might as well talk about that now. Your radiator options are, you can put a 120 millimeter rear radiator in there if you like liquid cooling. There is space in the top for a 240 millimeter top radiator. And what Corsair does here to keep the case size to a minimum, to keep the height from getting out of hand, they can keep the case short by shifting the radiator over from usually where you would see it up against the back here. It gets shifted forward, so the radiator actually inhabits this section right here if you want to put a 240 millimeter top radiator in there. And what that does, that allows the components on the motherboard clearance there from the radiator and the fans. They don't interfere. Now the front, you have the option of putting a 280 or 360 millimeter front radiator if you like. And again, this notch here is just to allow space for fans and a radiator that would be fitting in this zone right there. Now the front panel here does pop off, and it's important because there is a very large filter panel there. So in order to get to that, you got to pop this front panel off, and that reveals this vented section here, this filter panel, and it just pops right off. And the way it's retained is through these little magnets. There's one there, and then two more and two more at the bottom. So you can easily pop this filter panel out, clean it, and when you go to replace it, the tabs there at the bottom go into those little slots down here, like that, and then you just tilt this forward and the magnets take over and do the rest and hold it in position. Now front fans, again, you can add another radiator fan, cooling fan I should say, right here, 120 millimeter, or you can put two 140 millimeter fans in the front if you want to go that route. Top, if you don't want liquid cooling, you can still put two 120 millimeter fans or two 140 millimeter fans at the top. Although I only see mounting provisions really for one 140 millimeter fan. The website shows two at the top, so I'm not sure how those would fit. Anyway, the other thing I want to point out is the motherboard coverage. We go with, and it's embossed there, or actually, yeah, sort of hard to see, but it shows that it is capable of supporting an ATX, a micro ATX, and a mini ITX. So most of your major motherboard form factors are covered. Now looking at the back of the case with the cover off, there are just a ton of these little mounting provisions for your cable ties to keep all of your cable routing nice and clean. Corsair added a ton of those back here, which is good to keep your cables all nice and cleanly routed. All right, we've got two of these brackets for your solid state drives, and they unscrew a little tight there. So we'll use a screwdriver to pop that loose. There we go. So these brackets come off for quick installation of your 2.5-inch solid state drive. If you want to mount them back here, you do have the option though to mount one here and one here, so you can have a total of 4 on the back plane for the motherboard. If you want your standard 3.5-inch drives, you can put those in these hard drive cages here, so we can put up to 2 of those. That's just the hardware box with some of the installation goodies. But you also have mounting provisions here to put 2.5-inch drives on these cages. So you can have up to 2 3.5-inch drives, or if you wanted to populate everything with solid state, you could go with 6 solid state drives. Looking in the bottom here, we've got nice little rubber isolators for the power supply to keep the noise down, keep any vibration down. This hard drive cage is removable by taking this screw out and the 4 screws I pointed out earlier from the bottom. And I just took the screws out to show how this can be removed. Again, there's 1 screw here and there are 4 that come up from the bottom of the case. But you can take this entire hard drive cage out, and what that does is just opens that entire bottom of the chamber up for cable management. If you've got a non-modular power supply and you got a lot of extra cables going along for the ride, you can hide them there in a little more room. Or if you want a better path for the airflow coming from your front fans, it can push air through that chamber with a little less restriction when that hard drive cage is out of there. And if you're only going to use solid state drives, then you really don't need that cage down there anyway. Now, while this case does not have any built-in provisions for RGB, you can turn this into a smart case by purchasing the Corsair iQ Commander Pro, which is talked about here on the website, so you can get more information there. But you can buy some RGB fans. You can buy the Corsair iQ Commander Pro, which was mounting, I believe, over in here on some of the other cases I've seen, but I believe that's what these mounting holes are for. And that allows you to turn your case into sort of a smart case, but it is compatible there with the iQ Commander Pro. So really the next thing to do here is to sort of put some of this back together. I'll get my test system built up in there. I'll be using an older Z87 motherboard with a 4770K CPU. And the key to the performance of any cooling solution, whether it's an air cooler or a liquid cooler, is how much air, the volume of air that you can get in and out of the case as fast as possible. That's what's really going to affect how well your thermal solution works. Another cool thing that I'll point out here is I was putting the hard drive cage back in there. I'm putting these screws in, but to help locate this hard drive cage, there are these little dimples that fit into these little holes. So once you fit the dimple in the hole, your screw holes line right up. They sort of pop right into position, and they make the installation, or reinstallation in my case, much easier. And one more thing on the included fans here. They are, all 3 of them are 3-pin fans. As far as the maximum RPM, I don't see that listed anywhere, but that's easy enough to tell when I get the test system going and we can monitor fan speed. And looking at the contents of the hardware box here, the usual screws for motherboard installation. We've got some fan screws in various configurations. Then we have lots of cable ties here, again, to assist with your cable management. And before I get the system transferred from the 465X RGB that I just reviewed over to the 275R, you can see the similarities between these 2 cases. They're pretty much the exact same chassis. The difference being the 465X has all of the RGB functionality built in, plus that cool glass front panel. I'm about halfway through getting the system assembled here. That's the Noctua D14. So we'll test the system with an air cooler, and then we'll go ahead and fire up this brand new H100i PRO from Corsair, and the system will be powered by the HX850, which is an 850 watt power supply, also from Corsair. And looking at the top of the power supply is the label. Lots of good information there. Alright, so there's the HX850. I like to put the intake fan facing up, and you can put it in there either way, either orientation. But I like to put it in there that way so that we can pull air down through that nice vented section there inside the case. You can see here that the HX850 is just a little bit longer than a regular power supply. It's about 180 millimeters, whereas a standard power supply, they're usually in the 160 millimeter range. So there's about an extra 20 millimeters here that kind of pushes into this space. So there's not a lot of room, even though this is a fully modular power supply, there's not a lot of room for cable management there. But since I really won't be using this hard drive tray or cage, I can remove it. So I can take this screw out right here, and then there's some screws on the bottom of the case that hold the frame in, and I can pop this whole thing out, and that'll give me a lot of room. I got the screws out of the bottom, I got the screw out of this little top piece here, so you can see this is ready to be removed. However, I didn't realize I should have removed it before I put the power supply in, because I actually have to slide this to the right to where this frame drops down a little to get the clearance to get it out. So I'll have to pop the power supply back out, and then I can get this out. Alright, so the hard drive cage has been removed, the power supply has been put back in, so now you can see there's just a ton of space down there for cable management. Now I won't be using that many cables for this build, but it's a lot easier to get to them now. The power supply is installed, and now I'm ready to pop the graphics card in there. Now you can put it in the normal way where you just pop it into the PCIe slot, but I actually like the relocation cable here. You can buy these. Corsair makes them too, but I just happen to have a Fractal Design one. And it's basically like taking a remote PCIe slot and then putting it on there so you can put the card in vertically. And this case allows that because it has these two knockouts. So ultimately I can put the graphics card in there that way so you can really show it off. And that is how you show off your graphics card vertically. Of course, you have to have a case that has these slots, the proper provisions for that. But for a small investment, you can show off your graphics card. Particularly if you have one that has RGB effects, you'll get a lot more out of it this way. So I've had the system powered up now for a couple of hours to get everything to normalize. It's close to 70 degrees Fahrenheit in the room. We're idling at about 25, 26 degrees C on the CPU, which is a 3770K from Intel. We'll overclock it to 4.2 gigahertz using Prime 95 to stress test the CPU, build up some heat. Fans are in the stock configuration. We've got two 120mm front fans and one 120mm rear fan. Again, that's the Noctua D14 cooler. The goal here really is to just see how well the air flows through the case, and that's usually indicated by how well we can get heat out of the case that is generated by the CPU. So I expect to see temperatures somewhere in the mid-70s C, centigrade. So while I have the overclock still running, I'll take the thermal camera here and just sort of scan around the case. This doesn't really tell you anything other than just where the heat's concentrated. So no surprise there, that's where the CPU cooler is on the other side of the back panel there. So you will see some heat, residual heat coming through there. Looking at the front, there's really not much going on because that's the intake side. Looking across the top, of course, again, as we get closer to where the CPU cooler is, and heat is being pushed out the back of the case, so that's where you'll see some more heat. On the side here is the glass, and really it's reflecting heat from my body, so you can sort of see that image there. You can see the glass is a little warmer back here again, because that's the area where the CPU cooler is, and again back here where we're pushing the heat out of the back of the case from the exhaust fan. And down at the bottom is the HX850 power supply. Of course, under a load, it's going to be a little warmer. Alright, so now it's time to install this cool H100i PRO. Alright, so I've got the H100i PRO pretty much installed. Getting the pump mounted to the motherboard was fairly uneventful. It is nice to have the thermal paste already applied to the base of the pump. But you want to make sure you install this little cable here. This is a USB cable that's included with the cooler, and I ran it up and over the top, and it goes through the same hole in the case that the main power coming in for the CPU goes through. And then this cable runs along the back of the motherboard, and they give you enough that you can fish it up through this grommet here in this particular case, and then I can attach it to one of these USB headers on the motherboard. And this particular motherboard has 3, so I used one of them. Now, my initial plan was to put the radiator in the top of the case, and it did fit. However, what I ran into was my heat spreaders here on this Patriot Viper RAM was just a little too tall. So I could get one of the fans on, but the fan that went on the back half of the cooler was interfering with these. So I decided to go ahead and just put the cooler there in the front of the case. And there's really no right or wrong way to do that. You can put the cooler anywhere you want. And I also, the cooling lines there seem to flow best when I put them at the bottom, but again, you can put them at the top, whichever way the lines tend to want to bend. Now, as far as other connections go, you can plug the fans directly into your CPU headers up there, your fan headers, for your CPU cooling, but I'm going to use the included cable that connects to the pump there, so the pump will control the fans. There's also this other connector. It's a little 3-pin connector. That's basically a tachometer. It's sending the pump speed information back to the motherboard, so you want to make sure you plug that into one of your CPU fan headers. And the other connection is a SATA power connector there to give power to the pump. So that's it for connecting the pump to the system. Now when you're installing your fans, and you can put them on the back side of the radiator or you could put them on the front, either way is fine. But you want to make sure you put them in the right orientation so that you're moving air in the right direction. So this way it's pulling it through the radiator and exhausting it into the case. And another nice thing here with the 275R is it has some nice little cutouts here, some notches for cables. And what I decided to do is the cable coming off of the pump to control the fans that I just showed you had the two little sockets on there. Well, I ran that up and through that little pocket at the top, which is right here. And when I pull that cable through, now I can go ahead and connect my fans behind the motherboard tray to sort of keep all of the cable clutter out of view. So then the fan cable, actually can't even see it, it's down below, and I fished it through right here. So all of this can stay behind the motherboard tray. So there's the H100i PRO all fired up. Looks nice in that white background of this case, I have to say. I'll get the Prime 95 rolling so we can stress test it, build up a little heat, and see what the numbers look like. Alright, so the thermal testing has been going on here with Prime 95, loading up the CPU, and we've been running around 71, 72. See, it sort of bounces back and forth, and you can see the fan speed, or the pump speed I should say, and fan speed. I've got them set to the extreme profiles. And this is a best case scenario where we're running the fans and the pump at the maximum speeds. If I change this speed here and drop it down, it has a big impact on the temperatures up here. And I'll show you here with the thermal camera what that looks like. Alright, so using the thermal camera here to just sort of look at where the heat is, I have the front panel off and the dust filter off. If we look at the bottom right of the radiator where the warm coolant is coming in, that's going to be the warmest temperature that we'll see. And this is with the pump at the maximum and the fans at the maximum. So the coolant rises to the top, gets pushed to the top I should say, and as it slowly drops down, it cools where it will exit the radiator down here at the bottom left. If we look inside the case, and I'll have the glass panel off so we can look inside, the VRM there is the hot spot. That's pretty toasty there. The pump is cool, but you can look at the lines and you can see one line is a little warmer than the other. So that's the hot side going in, and there's the cool line there coming out. And if we look over at the radiator here, again, the colors just show that there's a temperature differential. You can see where the fan motors are. They're slightly warmer. Now what I'll do here is slow the pump way down, and we'll see that the temperatures are even more drastic here, especially on the radiator. So looking at the intake side, we're around 31, 32. And now I slowed the pump RPM down from 2700 to 990, or right at about 1000. CPU temperature has popped up to 81, 82 C. I slowed the fans down to about 1000 RPMs, and now we can see the coolant incoming temperature there has gone up several degrees. It will reach an equilibrium point where the amount of heat being removed is equal to the amount going in. And we'll probably see a greater color difference, on the two lines there. There's the hot side, definitely warmer, and then the cool side is there. So that just sort of gives you an idea of the effect of changing the pump speed and the fan speed on this cooler. And as pretty as the 275R is, it does not come with any RGB fans. So we're going to change that and play with this QL120 RGB fan kit. Sort of spice things up a little bit. It comes with 3 RGB fans and a lighting node core controller right there. So I'll get that installed and we'll see what it looks like inside the 275R. Alright, so it's time to dim the lights and get the side glass back on there. And now you can see what the QL120s do for this case. Now you need to install the iQ software, and you set up the lighting node, and then you can also connect all of that with the LED lighting, and it's synchronized with the pump. And there are many, many different lighting effects you can do. But I think 3 more of those fans would look pretty good in this case too. There's the rainbow wave. And this is the interface here, the iQ software. It used to be Link and Q, and then they sort of replaced all the functionality with iQ, so you really do everything from within the iQ interface. But I can come down here and select a different. And you can do all kinds of customization, but this is just sort of a idea of what you can do here. Again, that's the color shift. And this one is visor. One that I sort of like here is temperature. So you can set up your colors that will change at different temperatures. You can preset that, so you can basically take a quick glance at your computer and you'll know if things are getting too warm. And this one is called gradient. And again, you can get into the details and make all sort of customizations to the speed and colors. So right now you can get the 275R for $89.99 on Amazon. I think that's a good value for what you get. It's a very versatile case. You can build a very powerful system or a very small budget system with this case. You got the ability to show off your graphics card vertically. You can add a few goodies like the QL120 fans and the H100i PRO, and of course the HX850 power supply. And as I always say, it's all about the airflow, and the 275R proved that you've got enough air moving through it, even with the 2 stock 120mm front fans and the 120mm rear fan with the Noctua D14 air cooler. I could move enough air through here, keep my temperatures right about where I expected, around 76°C. And then with the H100i PRO, we were able to knock down the temperatures. So like I said, the 3 120mm included fans that I have shown there, the ones that I took out so that I could show off the QL120s. If you do want to go that route and go with the nice RGB sort of dress up there, keep in mind that Corsair has a really nice tutorial available. You just click down here on the iQ and it brings you over here to this YouTube page with all of these little videos showing you how to set it up and how to make it all work. So I'm going to give this the OCC Gold Award. This is Chris with Overclockersclub. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments section. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.